Today I would like to make a video that is a bit of a response and a bit of a sort of advice video. Specifically, I would like to respond to a video that Nike, the Warrior Witch, made, I think a week ago, but I don't know when this is gonna be up, so some time ago, about why you should practice daily. I had a lot of thoughts watching this video, and I wanted to share some of them with you, as well as explain how I do my daily practice, why I don't always do a daily practice, and what daily practice is like when you have a physical disability. It's very important for me to talk about this subject because Nike, in my opinion, did a very good job at addressing the core problem and worry when people say the phrase "you should practice daily" is ableist. Just in case anyone doesn't know, ableist, someone who is ableist or an ableist statement, means that it is discriminatory against people with disabilities, with no regards towards which type of disability. It absolutely can be physical, mental, executive dysfunction. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can be disabled, and ableism covers all of them. So Nike said in her video, obviously I'm just quoting, if I misremember something, don't go after Nike, it's my own fault. But yeah, she said in her video that she doesn't find that statement inherently ableist, because in her definition of daily practice, there are things that I don't consider practice, but because they are a part of her definition of daily practice, and they are so easy to do, even if you're disabled, that means that yes, it is absolutely possible to practice daily if you follow the same general guidelines that Nike was talking about. That's not how I view my practice, and so that's why I had slightly diverging views than Nike offered in her video, and that's why I thought that it was important that I make this one, because first of all, I'm disabled, so I have a first-hand account of what it means to try to practice as often as possible with a disability, and second, because the representation for disabled witches online is kind of depressing. I'm sure there are many more witches online who are disabled than we know, simply because they don't want to disclose it, and that's absolutely fine. Representation shouldn't be on the shoulders of disabled people. It should be on the shoulders of a community that makes itself as welcoming as possible to disabled people, so that when they come and they state that they have a disability, they feel safe doing so, and that way you have a larger spectrum of representation in your community. As far as I know, there are few witches who have a platform who are disabled. Nike said in her video that she suffers from mental illness and mental health related problems. I'm not going to try and remember because I don't want to get it wrong. I think she mentioned depression. I'm not sure. I don't want to get it wrong. And there's Annie, the Green Witch, who I don't think used the label disabled on herself, so I'm not going to do that for her. But what's certain is that she has talked about chronic health issues and chronic illness, chronic pain, chronic disease. All of that does fall under the umbrella of disability. However, it's not my place to diagnose anyone or to slap a label on anyone. I wanted to mention Annie because she, as far as I know, is the only physically disabled, and again, you know, when I mean disabled, I mean not that that's necessarily what she would call herself, but she's the witch who has a physical disability, who has the largest platform as far as I know. And I think that's a bit problematic in itself, just because when you start as a witch and you try to look around for representation and for guidance, for how am I supposed to do these spells, how am I supposed to do these rituals, how am I supposed to be a part of this community, when the advice that is shared for beginners is so inherently not made for disabled people. And I think that's a problem that many witches had and honestly still have in their practice. simply because it is easier that way, I classify myself online as a witch. That's not how I would label myself, I suppose, outside of online spaces, because that's not what I was brought up as, that's not what I was instructed as, taught. I'm French, as you probably know at this point, and what I've been taught from a young age is much closer to druidism than it is to witchcraft. I was taught herbalism and botany and sciences that are linked to the earth from a very young age. I was hiking with my botanist grandmother when I was like 5, 6, learning the Latin names of plants, even before I was allowed to touch a knife to harvest said plants. But yeah, I was brought up more as a druid, and also simply because the French tradition, the French folk practice is much closer to druidism than it is to witchcraft, at least in my family and in my close circle. I consider myself much more of a druid than a witch. What I know of witchcraft is self-taught and pretty recent, like a couple of years, compared to the way I was initiated formally by the elders of my community. So of course my practice is different in that way, and thus my daily practice is also very different, because I don't have the same rituals or habits than maybe modern witches have. I'm absolutely not a Wiccan, very far from that. I don't consider myself a modern witch either. The closest, I suppose, is maybe home witch, green witch. I'm closer to the ways of the earth and the home and the hearth. That's where my areas of expertise lie. So when I say that I don't believe that daily practice is possible when you're disabled, I am being very specific by defining daily practice and disabled, because that's my daily practice and that's my disability. Do I think that someone who has a very similar practice to mine and a very similar disability to mine would also have problem doing daily practice? Yes, I think so. But I'm not here to speak for anyone else. I still want to say that I wholeheartedly agree with Nike on the basis of her video and most of what she said inside. I think a conversation that was very important to have online, and I'm glad that she started it and that she evolved it, because it did start, I think, as a sort of response from what she saw online as you're being ableist if you say that disabled people can daily practice blah blah blah. You get the idea. So that's why I want to talk about what I consider my daily practice, as far as we agree to define daily as often as possible. Because I don't do daily practice. I'm not physically able to do. Because I don't consider some of the things that Nike named as daily practice to be part of mine. And because those things were so easy and so accessible, because they're not part of my practice, I don't have access to them. And thus, all my daily practice is much less accessible than what Nike listed in her video. And that's why I thought it was important to make this video, because if you have a past that is similar to mine, a disability that is similar to mine, or you simply want to see or hear from another point of view, I think that you could benefit from what I'm going to talk about now. So without further ado, these are my daily practices. When I wake up, I try to go to the altar that I have at that point, and if I don't have an altar, I just stay in bed and I speak prayers. I have with me my little book of prayers that I handmade, and I'm extremely proud of myself. And inside there are a number of prayers for different deities, some incantations. Those are things that I try to say in the morning to greet my deities and say, hello, I'm here, moderately alive, let's have a chat, I suppose. As some of you may know, if you've seen my last video, I follow the Gaulish pantheon and the Gaulish religion. I worship the gods of that pantheon because they are the gods of my ancestor. It's important to me to worship them, and I specifically don't use the word work with them. And if you're interested in why, you should check out my previous video. I'm gonna link it in the description. So I try to say prayers in the morning. I also renew when I need to my protection charms. I have this hematite ring which is charmed, and I also have a sigil that I crafted, which I draw on my left arm always. Here you go. Because left arm hurt, as soon as it's washed away, usually because it's a pretty sturdy marker. Maybe it takes 2 showers to go away, and then I renew it and I enchant it again. I also, depending on the days, I wear a glamour for dysphoria, because if you haven't noticed, in the beginning of every single one of my video, I try to remind kindly people to please not gender me as a woman. I'm not a woman. I use glamour just to ease my dysphoria and try to present myself to the world as faithful to myself as I can. So that's another one of the ways. But that and the protection charms are renewable rituals, I suppose, that I do, not daily, just because they tend to last longer than a single day. Most days I also try to do yoga, because I'm gonna repeat myself a lot, I feel. I'm disabled, and my disability specifically is in my right leg. I had an accident and then very crappy surgeries, which led to me not being able to use my leg as I should, as well as debilitating chronic pain, which unfortunately sometimes stops me from even getting out of bed. As I said, not being able to do daily practice. But I try to do yoga for 2 very simple reasons. First of all, it helps with my chronic pain. So if I'm fine enough to do it, I try, because even when I'm fine enough, I'm not free of chronic pain. I'm in pain every single hour of every day, of every month, of every year, for the last 10 years. So that's a bit exhausting. But if I can, I do yoga, and it's also a form of worship for me, because as much as it's a relief for my chronic pain when I'm done, as I'm doing it, it's excruciating. There is few ways I can describe my pain, especially because English isn't my first language, but it's very bad. But for me, it's, I guess, a sacrifice, which isn't a very nice word, I know, but don't know any better word to explain it. I know I'm going to hurt, but I know why I'm doing it. I'm trying to be better and feel better. So when I start my yoga, I say a few words and basically dedicate my practice to a deity. That's another one of my daily practice, which I try to do as often as I pray. So it's much more often than the renewal of my charms. I also have a ritual with my hair. I have very long hair. I don't really enjoy it, but I made a promise that I would grow my hair as long as I was physically able to handle it, and then give it away, or maybe sell it and then give the money to research for cancer. I take care of my hair, and I try to infuse stuff when I do it. It's complicated to explain. It's more subconscious than specially conscious, I suppose. I also try as much as possible to go outside, which is complicated for many reasons, not least of all because we are in a pandemic. But I'm lucky right now to be at my mother's. France entered a new quarantine, so I'm staying with her, and she lives basically alone in the Black Mountain, which you can see around me. It's a very beautiful place. I literally have the sun setting right there and the moon rising right here. So that's a pretty nice setting. The weather is very inconsistent, which is another problem for going outside, because my chronic pain is heavily influenced by the level of humidity in the air. It has been raining for the past week, which, as you can imagine, isn't the best for me. I woke up crying yesterday, so that's a clue on how I've been doing. But I try to go outside as much as possible, because my druidic practice, I suppose, is very linked to the earth, obviously. Also, it's my way of communicating with deities. I try to talk out loud to them. And because in specific places there are fae who are present, especially here, you can't see it from the way the camera is turned, but I'm going to show it right now in B-roll. Right behind the camera is a place of the woods where the Fae are very active. I found signs, I've heard whispers, I've left offerings. You can check on Instagram. I talk about that a lot more than I do here, but I'm gonna do a whole video about the Fae soon enough, because it's a very important part of my practice. I think it's very important in European-based practices. Coucou toi! Salut! Salut toi! Ça va? Ça va chouchou? Non, 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 on est gentil. Ça va mon chien? Well, it seems I have a guest. She's probably going to stay here. She's not mine. There's a very big community of hunters around, and today is a hunting day, which is why I had my orange cap, just in case, don't want to be shot in the head. Where was I? Yes, the Fae. I'm going to talk about them very soon, but that's also a reason why I try to go out every day. So that's a few ways I deal with my disability and daily practice. But there's one last thing that I want to talk about while I'm here and technically responding to someone else's video. Nike mentioned in her video the concept of guilt and feeling bad because you can't handle daily practice. And that was a very important message, which I'm going to reiterate, because I struggle also with guilt because of my disability. It's not your fault if you can't handle getting up, be it because you're like me, you have chronic pain, or because your depression is weighting you down so much that you can't even think about getting up, or because there's a world outside and you can't handle people right now. It's not your fault, it's okay, and you should not feel guilty that you can't practice. You can always do it the next day, you can do it the day after that, and if you take a 1 week break, 2 week break, it's okay. It's fine. And I struggle with that all the time. I'm saying that as much for myself as I'm saying it for you. Because the guilt that weighs on you when you think about the effort that it should take to pray, even lying in bed, how lazy of a person I am, that I can't even talk inside my own head. That's kind of hard. And I think it's important that we talk more about disability and witchcraft and just practice of spirituality in general, even religion in some ways, because I follow a pantheon. Wicca is a religion, and I'm certain they are disabled Wiccans. Like, I don't really know any, though I suppose Annie is a Wiccan who is disabled, but you get the idea. There has to be disabled Wiccans. It's a too big of a community with the percentage of disabled people in the world for there not to be any disabled people in Wicca. Same in my pantheon, or people who worship the Greek deities, or even in monotheist religions. I mean, disabled Christians, disabled Muslims, you know, like disabled Jewish. I mean, there's so much ways for you to feel guilty for not being able to practice something that is important to your life, and to feel guilty because you can't participate and you're not strong enough to get up and go to church, or you're not strong enough to stay at the table with your entire family and have a holiday that's centered around being with people when you can't even be with yourself. So we should be kinder with ourselves, and we should educate more on disability. We should have more representation, and I'm very, very glad that people like Nike and Annie are talking more about what it's like to practice when there are things in your life that are hindering, and when your body and your mind are actively trying to sabotage you every day. So that was that. Thank you for listening. I hope you're going to think about what I said and what Nike said. And if you have anything to add to the subject, if you're a disabled witch, a disabled druid, if you're part of one of the communities I mentioned and you realize that you haven't thought about what it's like to be disabled and be a part of your community when you're able-bodied, I would love to hear from you. I would love to have a conversation with you in the comments. I truly know what it's like, and I'd be very happy to help you. So thank you very much. Feel free to follow me on Instagram, to like this video if it was helpful to you or you found it interesting, and share it around, because that's the best way to help the message get across. I'm going to link the people and videos I mentioned below if you'd like to check what I've been talking about. And yeah, subscribe if you'd like to hear more. Alright, see you later.